Get ready to get ready. Coming to you live from the MFG studios in the heart of America's summer golf capital. We help you play better golf. It's time to get your game on and take it deep. This is the Mike Fay Golf Show. Here's your host, Mike Fay.
Well, welcome everybody to this episode of the Mike Fay Golf Show. And with us today we have Frank Costella, our staff writer. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing great, Mike. How you doing today?
Very good. Pretty exciting day today. We've got a special guest in-house here, Brandy Jackson. How you doing, Brandy?
I'm doing awesome. Hope you guys are as well.
We are.
We are.
It's winter time, and I thought it would be really cool to have Brandy on and talk a little bit about her and what she's got going on, and then have some questions, roundtable discussion about a lot of things that she does, which is cool, and see what we can learn today. For those of you that don't know Brandy, let's talk a little bit about her. She has played some serious golf in her time. She was a member of Furman University golf team, where some very famous LPGA players have played, like Dottie Pepper and Beth Daniel, Betsy King. She was the SoCon champion. She's won the SoCon championship in 2002, and she was Player of the Year in 2003. And in 2002, the runner-up for the U.S. Women's Amateur. How cool is that?
That was very cool. Definitely one of my favorite weeks of my golf career. One of the turning points of my golf career, too. But just such an awesome week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what comes next is playing the LPGA Tour, Symetra Tour, and 3 U.S. Opens, all those things. What a great playing career you had. Really good.
It was good. Unfortunately, not as good as I was hoping for it to be, which is why I'm sitting here doing this instead of still out playing on tour. But it was a great opportunity. Learned a lot, got to see a lot, got to do a lot, and I wouldn't pass it up for the world. So very lucky to have gotten out there and had some years of LPGA status, and then some years where I went back to the Symetra Tour and just had a blast out there. Wish could have done a little better and stayed out there, but it's led me into what I'm doing now, so I can't complain too much.
You're right. I mean, that kind of experience, pretty cool to see how you got there. And this is what we're going to talk about today is getting our kids to college, playing college sports. How do we do it? So then you ended up working for as a recruiting expert speaker, right? Traveling all around doing stuff.
I did, yeah. Actually, the goal was to continue playing golf and then doing speaking events as I was playing. But I decided after about a year of doing that I really enjoyed the recruiting stuff, and I lost my LPGA status at the end of the 2009 season. And I ended up just kind of going more full-time into doing the recruiting. But yes, I was working for a big national company that's more of a recruiting service. They do a great job. I learned a lot through them. Started working with the golf families that they have. Did that for a while before I decided that I can kind of do this more on my own from more of a consulting perspective. So started that back in 2011, and still continue to do a lot of speaking stuff. But that first phase of having to go out and do speaking events and get in front of people and talk was a huge, huge life changer in my life for sure.
Yeah, of your formation of your own company, all these different experiences you've gone through and being able to share, it's pretty important, isn't it?
Yes.
Saying, hey, I've been there, that kind of stuff, what you're going through right now, because it's a tough part of life going to college for anyone. Trying to figure out what you're going to do, what you're going to be, all those kinds of things, and then add sports on top of it. It's a lot to think about, right?
It is. It's a big transition, and a lot of what I've learned since then. I know you've got the phrase, if I would have known then what I know now. Obviously, a lot of people can say that, but there's certainly a lot that I've learned through my professional career and with my business that if I could have learned a little bit earlier on, my transition to college golf would have been much easier. My transition out on tour would have been a lot better, as much from a personality standpoint as anything. And then it's just such a higher standard now for what the college coaches are looking for. The kid I was coming out of high school would have just gotten eaten up by the process. I would have gone in on visits and wouldn't have had anything to say. My parents would have probably done the talking. mainly because they know that I wouldn't have done anything. I would have been too scared. I would have been afraid to call the coaches. But, now these coaches are looking for maturity, and they're looking for so much more from the players. And there's such a higher expectation now. And there's a lot of kids that just don't have that yet. So working with them on a lot of that it's what I really enjoy doing, because it's, to see the growth in myself over these years of doing that. It's kind of cool to try to help somebody who's still at a little bit earlier stage start doing that.
Right. I was checking out your website. Something fairly new we were talking about is called Recruit Caddy. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, it's one of the services I have. I have a couple different ways that I work with families, but I've had a lot from all over the world, get in touch with me and seeking out help. And, I've always written a lot of content. I've always tried to have a lot of kind of how-to guides and, resources. I do a lot through social media. So I basically took a lot of that and just tied it into one big program together. So for a family who really wants to try to tackle the process, maybe on their own, I use it with my full-time players as well. It just gives them a lot of the resources that they're going to need just to navigate the whole process, down to, questions that they can ask the coaches, just a bunch of links to the different resources, how to build your resume. On top of that is some different levels of practice drills just to help players have a little more structure to what they do. There's a series of workouts in there. So it's really kind of giving that complete package if a family really wants to just try to navigate that process. So they don't necessarily get me with it to a degree like my full-time players get, but they get a lot of what's in my head and a lot of what I do use through the process of working with my own players.
Yeah, it's check it out. It's very, very cool. There's a lot of good information in there for everyone. Okay, Frank, you ready for the round table discussion? Should we play some drum rolls or anything? Dun, dun, dun,
I'm
dun,
definitely
dun.
ready, Mike.
Okay, good. I thought you were ready. First question is, what do you think about sports specialization, Brandy? What do you think about the 12-year-old who decides that they're just going to golf or they're just going to play baseball?
Yeah, I'm certainly biased against it. I grew up playing volleyball, basketball, grew a little bit of softball early on. I did about anything you could get a ball in my hand, I was going to play, and actually was able to continue that all the way through. Played basketball till my sophomore year of high school, and I played competitive volleyball both in and out of high school, all through high school. So I got to play 6 years of that. And that, for me, was just a huge part of my development and growth as an athlete, not just as a golfer. And I know times are different. I know it's a lot harder. But two of my highest recruited players are actually very similar in that. One plays squash and field hockey, and then another played soccer and played basketball. And just finally starting as sophomores to kind of focus a little more strictly on golf. But they're some of the best players in the country, which I think says something about the fact that they've stuck with other sports for so long. They've built true athleticism and not just golfers. I know it's tough. I know it's a lot harder to do that these days, but anything that's, that a player can do to try to build more athleticism and not get, too specialized in the sport and overuse and all that's just a lot of issues we're starting to see more and more these days.
Yeah, I was last night in my Facebook feed, I saw that someone put up some video of Allen Iverson playing football. And he was a fantastic football player. I mean, he was flying. You could tell how much better he was than the rest of the kids on the team. Flying. What do you think about that, Frank?
Well, Mike, I've seen those videos, and Iverson was a very, very good athlete. He was actually, at that point in time in his life, a better football player than he was a basketball player. So I'm in total agreement with you and Brandy. I try to suggest to all of my students at that age, play as many sports as you possibly can. Become a good athlete. I think it's going to transition well with golf.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We have to get all of our skills developed, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about what's the process to getting recruited by a college, Brandy. What do you have to do?
Well, there's a lot that you have to do, and it is a little different for each player. It's probably my most used phrase is "it just depends." It's probably my answer I have a lot of times for different questions that I get asked about recruiting. But some of the general things, one of the first steps, it's actually really not even one of the first steps, is building your resume, getting that together. You can do it. There's a lot of different online versions. I use the Junior Golf Scoreboard resumes with all of my players. It's a great way to have your resume in there with the rankings. You can do it as a hard copy, just as a PDF, as a document. A lot of different ways of doing it. Having what's on there, what's important on there with your academics, your tournament scores, your contact info, and a good swing video as well is really important. And getting that out to the coaches. I say that's not really the first step, because a lot of times I have players who have done that, and then they send me the list of coaches that they've tried to contact, and it's just not realistic at all. It's very unaware of, while they claim they know that where they fit in, then when I see that list of schools, it really doesn't. So doing your research and doing your homework on the golf programs and the scores, and not looking at that one exception of a player who went to a particular school that might not have been, as strong as you expect them to be, but really looking at the whole picture with the roster and what those players are shooting, an idea of what they were doing as a junior golfer, studying some things about the school, getting to know all that before you just start sending out emails to a bunch of coaches. So doing your research, knowing where you fit in, getting your resume together, getting a good video with it, and just start contacting coaches. I think something else we may be talking about is a little bit of the rules side of things within that, because there are some contact periods where coaches can and can't reply back to you. But that's a general getting started steps to the process with getting your resume out there.
As coaches ourselves, like Frank and I, when we're teaching, what part do we play in this role when we're teaching someone all the time to help these kids to get these scholarships? Like you said, where do you fit in, right? What do you think? What's the responsibility of their personal coach to this? What do they need to do?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot. I talk with a lot of swing coaches and the instructors and the junior golf directors and all that. And some of them refer their players to me because they'll admit they don't, they can help them some, but they don't necessarily know the whole spectrum of things. But whether you do or not, there's still a lot of things that a coach can help the junior golfer with. For one, is trying to help identify some schools that are realistic, helping them kind of narrow their search down for where they're going to fit in, helping them figure out what they want. Everybody has this D1 mindset out there, but that's not always what it's all about. Helping get their video together. That's something that a lot of coaches are able to do. It's part of what I do with players, but a lot of times if they're more remote, we'll ask for swing coach to film some video to put together for a good recruiting video to go with their resume. And most importantly is to be that third-party reference, especially prior to that September 1 of junior year. The coaches cannot call the players back, but they can call a third party, such as a player's coach. So being able to take those calls and also helping to initiate some of those calls if a player is interested in a particular school will really help that player get ahead in the process, maybe get on some visits early on. And then the coaches, being honest with the college coaches, really giving them insight about that player, what kind of person they are, really kind of being honest with those college coaches will help that coach understand whether or not that player is going to be a good fit for their program.
Yeah, Frank, you and I have talked about this a lot with different players that we coach and who you're talking to as far as college coaches back and forth. How important is it for the non-golf stuff, the grades, the way they are, their attitude, all that kind of stuff? Do you see that happening more often? I see it. It's tremendously important, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've had coaches tell me that by the time they get the student, they want the student to be number one, somebody that's got good practice habits, number two, somebody that's good in the classroom and is adjusting to being away from home. So yes, the things outside of golf are extremely important to the coaches that I've been in contact with. Brandy, what are you hearing from coaches?
Yeah, that would be another big key area that the coaches, the junior golfers, swing coach and everything can help them with is teaching them some of those things. It's a lot of what I focus on with them because I don't do any swing instruction. A lot of them I don't see at all with their golf game. My job is trying to get them in good hands with a good coach. So then I'm trying to help them develop some of those other skills. The coaches, it's some of the big things that they talk to me about is communication skills. We're definitely in a different world where a lot of these kids can't even look you in the eye and talk to you and carry on a conversation. It's all through their phone. So the ones that can stand out and aren't afraid to pick up the phone and call the coach and can carry on a mature conversation when they go on visits, the ones of the kids that can speak up for themselves, they're looking for kids that are gracious, that are appreciative of the opportunity they have. They respect and treat their parents well. They're definitely looking at the big picture just as much as they are their golf game. Your scores have to be within a certain range for, certain coaches to look at you. But then within that, it's so much more about who you are outside of the golf course. Academically, how are you? What kind of student are you? What's your attitude on the golf course like? How are you on your visits? And another big part, probably, and I've just been having this conversation with a player who's struggling with this a little bit, been talking with her coach some, is helping those players understand about really kind of taking ownership of their game. And a big thing that the coaches like to hear is when a player goes to a tournament, and whether they play good or bad, is do they understand what they're doing, and do they understand what they need to work on? This player didn't play good, and I had her do a write-up about to follow up with some coaches that we had either come out to watch her or that were following her. And she simply said, her response was just something, I know I didn't play well. I didn't practice as much as I should. I'm going to work on my swing. It's going to get better. And I mean, that was really pretty much all she said. So I really had to try to pull out of her what was going on in her game. What did she work on, and start to think more, and kind of taking that ownership of her game and what she's doing and what she's working on. Coaches love to see that more than just, I'm going through swing changes and, I didn't play well because I didn't feel comfortable with it. They want more than just that too. And that's a big thing that the coaches can work with their players on for sure.
Yeah, a lot of times, what we are working on, Frank, is, I didn't play good. Well, why? We have no idea.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Yep. I mean, no clue why it happened. And, a lot of times it can be swing changes. It could be, right there. It can be a lot of stuff, right, Frank?
Yep. Yeah, a lot of outside activities entering into what they're doing and how they're thinking and, what's going on in their personal lives. A lot of the things Brandy talked about. College coaches are concerned about those type of things. I mean, I've had college coaches tell me that, they're not in the business to teach a kid how to practice. They better have those kind of habits before they get to the university. It's not up to them to tell a kid to go out and practice. The kid has to be able to do that on their own. So there's a lot of things today in coaching that I believe the college coach has to look at that they didn't have to look at in the past. And Brandy, you're right. The social media thing is huge today. They're going to get on social media. They're going to look at what a young player's putting on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, those things are important. I try to, instruct my students, be very, very careful about what you're putting on social media because you don't know who's going to look at it.
Yeah, it's a big part of recruiting now, and on a lot of different ways. Sometimes the coaches, you've got to be careful what you put from, from a behavior standpoint, in terms of partying and that kind of stuff. And especially on the girls' side, maybe even more than the boys, the female coaches, and I do it myself. I learn a lot about players just through their social media. I mean, you're going to be posting about the things in your life that you care about the most and that takes up most of your time. And when it's all, boys and drama and all that kind of stuff, those are red flags as well. It may not be that you're out partying and acting crazy, but coaches are trying to get to know what kind of kid they're getting. And your social media represents a lot of that. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. But sometimes your priorities may not necessarily line up to what those coaches are looking for. And sometimes you got to understand that sometimes it's just a personality match, and what you're putting on social media sometimes can reflect that. So a lot of times that is the coaches, a lot of my brain and what I do kind of works the same way as a college coach. So I really learn a lot about my players just through what they're posting about, where their priorities are. Not that I wanted to be out on their phones at the golf course, videoing every drill that they do or anything like that. But when you don't see anything about golf, it's all about everything else, you're glad to see them have a life, but sometimes you got to stop and say, okay, really, where are our priorities? And that's not going to match up to what some coaches may want from the collegiate level.
Over the last, week or so, we've seen Lydia Ko, mm-hmm. right? And, parents play a big role in what happens, right? I mean, what do you help with parents in the recruiting process? do you have to coach them as much as Frank and I are coaching them, Brandy? I mean,
Honestly,
seriously.
I have some that I seriously think they feel like I'm their therapist sometimes, because they will call me and vent to me, and it's what I'm there for. Sometimes I have to put some boundaries there on the fact that, yeah, my full-time programs are somewhat unlimited consulting, but that's more for the players, not always the parents. So I've learned how to kind of filter that a little bit, but I do, and it's hard for me, especially I'm not a parent myself, and even if I am, it's always hard to tell a parent how to parent their child. There's not right or wrong ways, and it's definitely a very, very touchy subject. I have a lot that come to me for advice. I have some that, never will, and think that they are certainly doing things the right way, and they don't care about anybody's opinion, but it's a major part of it. The coaches are definitely recruiting the whole family. A lot of how parents are handling things are major parts of it. And sometimes they've got great intentions. It just, from a recruiting perspective, can come across as the wrong way. And trying to guide them on some of that, even as parents, trying to keep them from posting too much on social media about their son or their daughter is sometimes things that I have to work on. Just trying to make sure that they, I know a lot of times they just want what's best for their kids, and they're trying to help them, but just trying to kind of navigate that sometimes and not let them overstep and set a wrong impression onto the coaches. From a golf perspective, just trying to get them to sometimes calm down and relax and understand that it's not the end of the world. It's a balance. I know you as instructors have to work on that, a lot, especially from the golf side of things and the parents getting involved. I'll probably deal with a little more on just the personal side of things and then how that relates to the coaches. But it's seeing it more and more, and it's becoming more and more of an issue for sure, with the parent involvement and how that's affecting things.
So, let's say a recruiting company wants to, recruit this young player, and they go and they meet the parents, and like you said, they're recruiting the family too, right? It's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the college coaches go, for sure. I mean, they're looking at the family, the parents. They feel like, there's only going to be so much separation when you get to college of parent and child. It's a very tight-knit team. It's a little different than a football team where there's, 60 guys out there with, 10 different coaches coaching different players. You've got that one coach, maybe one assistant. There's only going to be, 5 players traveling, another couple of players that are probably going to be at home. So it's a very tight-knit team. So from a coach-player perspective, definitely. I know you mentioned recruiting company, not quite sure where the question as far as the recruiting company goes, but more than happy to address that or talk about that. Just wasn't sure that relation to the parent
well,
side
Frank
of
and Frank and I were discussing. Some of his players have been called and tried to recruit, right, Frank?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And
His services have been calling the parents and saying, we saw how your child played, let's say, in the
Gotcha.
state finals, and
Yeah.
we're interested in helping you get them a college scholarship.
Yeah, you definitely have to be very aware of what's going on with the recruiting services and the recruiting companies. Obviously, I work in that business. I've tried from the very beginning. I worked with a recruiting company, recruiting service for a year and a half, so I saw that side of the business. And luckily, I worked with a very good reputation one that actually was a really good one. I've seen some really bad ones and heard some bad stories. It's a touchy service in a touchy world because there are a lot out there that aren't doing it for the right reasons, that are promising things ahead of time that they're not allowed to do NCAA wise. And from a college coach perspective, like I said, I've always tried to separate myself, and my job is actually trying to help the player and the family do it themselves, not to do it for them, not to make any promises of what's going to happen. It's just, hey, you want to do this? I'm going to help you figure out how you can do it and how you can navigate it and putting your best foot forward. Thankfully, it's how I've developed a lot of really good relationships with the coaches, because a lot of them do get frustrated with the recruiting companies and recruiting services because a lot of times they promise the families a lot of stuff. A lot of times the information goes out unsolicited. So a Division I coach may get a girl who's still shooting 90, and they get kind of frustrated with that. And sometimes the families feel like, well, hey, I'm paying this person. Why can't you do it for me, kind of thing. So there's some different ways. There's some good and bad to it. but certainly want to do your homework about any company or any service that you do anything with. I mean, most everybody asks me a ton of questions about what I do and how I do things. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. But a lot of the companies and the services can be kind of hit or miss as to just how legit they are, how the college coaches feel about them. You can really get a lot of work done on your own for sure. However, in talking to a lot of the coaches and within what I do, it's amazing some of what the coaches receive from players. And that's why they do know a lot of these families need the help because they get, these crazy emails, or they get, players who have no clue, that they're the number 2 ranked team in the country, and, you're shooting 90 and you're emailing them asking, about playing for their program when you're a senior and, in high school, and just so little awareness. So the coaches know that a lot of the families need the help. They need some guidance. A lot of them really are clueless on what's going on. But if the recruiting service is really not going to help you with those things, it's only going to do you so much good if they're just going to send your information out to the coaches and that be it.
Yeah, it's so important what you do, Brandy. I'm so happy that you came on today with us. It is. And I'm glad we were able to share this chat, right, Frank, about this from
definitely.
a coaching perspective too, because we have to, and we'll be sending them along your way to help them. So, all right, well, let's wrap everything up. Thanks so much, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy. This was you're a great guest to have on today. I picked up a lot of great information from you.
Well, I'm glad I could help some. Same thing. It's always good for me to hear, the coach side of things and what you all, kind of struggle with and may need some help on as well. And try to develop those good relationships with all those coaches out there. I could talk about this all day long, as you can tell. I have a lot to say about it. I enjoy what I do and kind of passionate about it. So thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the chance to come on and talk a little bit about the recruiting side of things.
You bet. We can catch up with you on your website, right?
Yes, you can go to brandyjacksongolf.com. That's Brandy with an I. Has all the information about me, the different services that I have. Sometimes it's a little hard to understand because I try to fit for a lot of what players need out there, but more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Anybody that's looking for some help through the process, just shoot me a message and I will get back to you.
Well, very good. Well, thank you guys. Have a super day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mike Fay Golf Show. This has been a Mike Fay Golf production. Follow us today on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are Mike Fay Golf, Team MFG.